Hello, everyone in Facebook land. This is Erica Busillo Adams from Fountainhead, Rhode Island, here with the wonderful Katie McDonald of B.Nourished, and welcome to our third live spotlight. So, Katie, thank you so much for being here and for joining us today. I just wanted to quickly introduce you all to Katie. Before I do that, I want to quickly thank our sponsors, Insperity and the Daily Note, our wonderful community sponsors, for making spotlights like this possible. So thank you to them. Katie is a keynoter and a self-care strategist with a concierge coaching practice for high achievers taking care of business, often at the expense of taking care of themselves. Also just published a planner with a digital course that distills the Be Nourished methodology for getting it done without coming undone. So Katie, thank you so much for joining us today and for talking about self-care and wellness.
Thank you for having me. Happy to be here.
So we usually start these off with, a quick introduction of yourself. And I know I just gave a little bit of background, but would love to hear more about the Be Nourished origin story and really what drove you to this work.
I was addicted to work. I was a workaholic and I didn't know how to set boundaries. I didn't know that I had the right and permission to take care of myself. In fact, self-care felt like a nuisance and an obstacle to an otherwise very productive day. So I really had to fall apart in order to wake up. And I got ulcerative colitis, pneumonia, shingles, asthma, allergies, anxiety, depression. The list goes on. There were more symptoms that I ignored until they got so loud that I couldn't. I was by all accounts, highly successful at Time magazine, selling advertising in 45 national publications, top of my game by everybody, the outside perspective, but inside my body was falling apart and certainly my mind followed quickly. So I had to become my first client. And I vowed that I was going to take everything I had studied, all the books on my nightstand about well-being, and actually put it into practice to implement it. And within 6 months, I turned everything around. I was healthier than I'd ever been and had learned mindfulness and exceptional nutrition and self-care habits that have lasted a lifetime, decades now at this point. So I wanted to go back to my tribe of doers and teach them how to be. Teach them to renegotiate their lives and their habits so that they could thrive instead of strive and survive, which was all I was doing on a good day.
I think, and I'm sure a lot of our community members will relate to what you're saying. Speaking personally as a high achiever and someone who struggles with self-care, right? You just get caught up, in these cycles. And I'm also a dancer. And so I always say that, the body knows like what you described, like the real wisdom of yourself, like knows what's going on. It's like often trying to alert you that something needs to change. You need to pay more attention to yourself. You need to integrate your needs much more and better with, how you're taking care of everyone else's needs, business, family, etc. And I think, especially right now with 2020, all of this is even more top of mind, I think, as everyone's worlds are colliding in new and challenging ways. So it's becoming much harder to, this is time for work, this is time for being with family, this is time for personal self-care, which can be hard if you're in a house full of people, right? To even find that space for yourself. So I'm curious, before maybe we get more into that, how do you define, like, what does radical self-care mean to you? Like, what is your working definition of what it means to self-care? Because I feel like there's a lot of self-care gets labeled onto a whole lot of things. So I'm curious about what it means to you.
Yeah, I mean, I think self-care is radical in our culture. We have a culture of, it's funny, it's this like self-denial, at the same time indulgence in our culture, and also a tendency to numb. And self-care is waking up. Self-care is doing exactly what you said, which is like we live neck up and hang out in our heads, which often can be very dark alleys during this time, especially. And it's really about connecting the two. It's about inhabiting our bodies. It's about honoring the responsibility to be whole and to tend to this body and mind that is in service to the people we love, and a deep responsibility to ourselves and to our community to be the best version of ourselves. So self-care is waking up to that responsibility and privilege. And it's also, it's designed to be a threat to the martyrdom and self-denial that is so inherent in our culture right now. It's we have to transfer the habits and the standards that we have for ourselves in our workplace, with our families, all these external commitments. We're giving feasts daily to all these constituents in our lives, and then leaving crumbs at best for ourselves. So self-care is actually saying, I'm actually going to treat myself the way I treat everybody else, at least on an equal plane. And instead of cascading to the bottom of the to-do list, thinking we can get away with it. And that's what I thought. I could get away with it until it was very clear that I didn't understand the responsibility I had, that my productivity, my success was dependent on my well-being instead of a threat to it or an obstacle to it.
I think it's such an important shift. And I think it's such a hard, I think, it's difficult, especially for younger professionals, but I think professionals in general, because as you said, we live in this climate that rewards, right, this martyrdom and this sort of self-starvation and in all ways attitude to serve, whether it's your clients, your business, your family, your friends, your pets,
Right.
You name it, your community at large. And I think, thinking specifically talking about work, if I think about this, I think part of your philosophy, and I think you're absolutely right, is that when you do this kind of self-care, when you make yourself your first client, right, you actually are more productive, you're more innovative, you have more brain space to think about challenges differently and bring more value to your workplace and to your team. And so I'm curious about, how you think, like both, how can business leaders and managers make that a part of workplace culture and encourage that, from their team and their colleagues? And also, like, how can you and maybe in particular for a younger professional, like, how can you advocate for that for yourself? Like, how do you show that value?
Yeah, I mean, you made some excellent points about, this is a no-brainer. We know that if we've had one night of poor sleep, we can't form a sentence. Anything that we're doing, we're going to pull it off because we're doers and we're high achievers. We're going to pull it off, but is that really what we want? Is that bringing our best work to it? When we're well, when we're nourished, we're actually in a state of flow. We have the creativity, we have the mental agility, which, by the way, we really need right now, the resiliency, the tenacity, the creativity, the resourcefulness. Everything that makes us successful comes in flow instead of resistance, instead of the grind and the hustle when we're compensating for poor habits. So really what we're talking about is self-care is self-leadership. And what we need to do as leaders of our own lives, right, is to have our own backs the way we have everybody else's. But we also need to role model boundaries. We need to be clear about what we say yes to and what we say no to, because so many people report in this sheepish way, like, oh, I'm not good at saying no. It's like, that's ridiculous. You're great at saying no. It's just, you're always on the end of that.
Or it's
You're
a badge of honor.
No.
Right? Or it's a badge of honor. Like, I never say no to anything.
Ridiculous, right? Well, you know what? When I hear that now, I'm like, wow, that's tragic. Like, that's really tragic, because you're saying yes to everyone else and you're saying no to yourself repetitively until you get into another state of crisis, right? Other than the one that we have right now. So we need to role model boundaries. We need to have respect for our mental health instead of shame. We need to cultivate a life outside of work, which only ends up enriching our work. The fact is, let's just decide this, like, we know this to be true. This is a good business strategy.
Yes.
And that was part of what I had to do because of my addiction to productivity, right? And then addiction to sugar to keep me fueled, in theory. Of course, it didn't work, but that's what I told myself, because I was running on fumes, and then I would just, fuel with sugar till I was circling the drain. But what I was saying is, like, I didn't understand that, like, I actually have to fuel this mind and body with the content that I consume, with the food I consume, what I drink, my mindset. I have to tailor this and choose this so that I can be in a position to be successful, in the real way of success, not the superficial way, but like really making a difference, leaving a legacy, having an impact, all the reasons that we say we're doing those things, wanting abundance, beautiful abundance that can't happen when we're skimping on everything else. It simply can't happen. So it's really important that we start changing the way we approach self-care, understanding it's actually a tool instead of the obstacle. So I suggest for those of you that are in a workplace that isn't your own, right? Like it's not yours, you don't have full control over it. Suggest a 2-week trial of reduced hours. And I've done this with my clients, is really say, okay, for the next 2 weeks, we're going to reduce the hours. We're going to actually have human hours of maybe you end at 5. And you know what? We're going to then measure the output, collaboration, and quality. And you know what we're going to discover? Of course, every time, so much more impactful, so much more effective. All these things it's just evidence. So maybe we need proof. And this is how we do it. Do a 2-week trial and stay 100% consistent. Start time, end time, and then evaluate. Well, how much more effective was I? I guarantee you it's going to be illuminating, if nothing else.
I love that. I am inspired to do this myself. I have probably team members watching me right now who are going to hold me to that.
Well, do it as a team. I would encourage you. So I actually had my client who was running a department. And the leaders have to role model this. Like we could talk about it all day long, but what does it actually mean? It means that you set a boundary to say, like, I am not available after 5 p.m. or whatever time that is. At this point, we have to focus on quality of work that we're doing, not quantity of work, because we have so many competing roles. We've got to be at the top of our game, and to neglect self-care is a stupid strategy. It doesn't work. It's ineffective.
I completely agree. I love that. Okay, so team, you heard it here first. We're gonna do this 2 weeks.
I want to text. I want to know what happens.
Thank you, Katie, a prize. I bet. Well, and I think I'm thinking of this especially at this moment where and I work in the nonprofit sector, but no matter where you are, we've all been called upon this year to be resilient. Like we've pushed against the boundaries, right, of our resilience, of our creativity, of our ability to think differently quickly about how we do our work and what our work means and how we create impact with our work, how we manage our teams. So I think, we're sort of pushing against the boundaries, and I feel this for myself personally, like that my creativity stores are low right now. And I want to build them back up. And so I'm starting to think about, okay, like it makes sense that in this moment, in this year, I'm feeling that way, but how do I do that? And self-care is usually I think always the answer to that. What do I need to do to fill myself back up? But I'm wondering now that I'm thinking about this year, how can we, like, how does self-care shift in moments of crisis? And I think for people, like, let's say you had a good, you were great with boundaries, you had a good self-care routine before the pandemic, and then your world got turned upside down, right? Your schedule is completely different. You're a parent and a professional and a teacher all, at the same time. And I think this is also true for other crises during life. Like if you have a very ill family member and you have a medical emergency, you're getting a divorce, you're going through job or home loss, these things that really completely shift our worlds. How do you maintain self-care, I guess, during that time is my question, in a way that's meaningful? How do you stay gentle with yourself? And how does your self-care evolve during times of crisis, and how should it evolve?
Yeah, I mean, the bottom line is if you go down, it all goes down. Right? It's just, and we're in a pandemic. Like, what's it going to take? A pandemic, right? Like, for us to understand, like, it is self-care is not a luxury. It's a responsibility, and it is a tool that we can utilize and absolutely have to double down on and utilize, right? It starts with a reframe. The fact is, I don't know if I'm allowed to say it, but like shitstorm protocol. That's what I say with all my clients. It's like, okay, shitstorm protocol. Like we actually create one even when we're not in anyone, we create what that protocol is so that we automatically shift into what that is. So
Mm.
I checked in, the start of this pandemic, I checked in with every one of my clients and my past clients. And what I was hearing across the board is they're like, Katie, we know what to do. Like this is what we've planned for, right? It's that emergency preparedness, but we don't do that for ourselves. It's like,
Ourselves.
okay, well, if your normal workout is an hour, well, that's probably not going to happen right now.
Yep.
Okay, good to know. Does that mean that you abandon the workout? No. It means your workout may be a half an hour walking while you've got your AirPods on and you're having a meeting. Like, we've got to be creative here. And of course, the best ideas come to us when we're not, when we're in the shower, when we're doing something else. So we have to create spaciousness, and we have to honor, like, okay, we're going to pivot, but we're not going to abandon our habits. We actually need them more than ever. So we got to look for shortcuts. We got to let go of perfectionism. We've got to simplify. Perfectionism is a stalling tactic. It's an agent. It's an agent of procrastination. So the shitstorm protocol means, okay, I'm going to look for my vegetables are going to be frozen. How am I going to get the grocery delivery, right? Instead of going, which has multiple benefits right now. All these things, we don't want to turn to substance and numbing, which is what is celebrated in our culture, frankly. Everyone's like, ha, 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 all the wine. Well, you know what? I get it, but that is so not going to help you right now. Like, it's not. It's going to shut you down. It's going to compromise your immune system. It's going to make you more vulnerable. And if you are really that person wearing all those hats, the teacher, the homemaker, as well as the executive, all these things, like, okay, you're actually making yourself more susceptible to the very thing that can dismantle everything. So it's really important that we hold ourselves to actually higher standards without falling into perfectionism. I like to say, like, we got to get off our backs, but we also have to get off our butts. And that's the piece, that's the tough love that I'm always working on, that delicate balance with my clients. Like, look, the fact is, there are ways in which we're underperforming for ourselves, and it's in relation to self-care, and where we're over functioning in other ways, usually for everybody else. We can't control what's happening right now, but we can control how we respond to it. And if up to this point, your response includes ignoring your own needs, not getting the foundational, like, we're talking basic stuff. We're talking sleep. We're talking, good nutrition, not perfect, but good nutrition. We're talking about stretching your body, having some quiet moments of reflection. If these basic things aren't working or aren't a priority right now, time to change. Doesn't matter what you've done up to this point, but now is the time. This is your after to the before. Wake up and do the things that you need to do to really kind of honor your humanity so that you don't go down.